Hi, welcome everybody. Today's session is quite packed with awesome content. As you all know, in this world where we're drowning with forgettable content, um, it's really, really hard to stand out. We're diving into the secrets of creating content that's so irresistible, so valuable that people wouldn't just consume it, they would actually pay for it. Today, join me on our monthly session is a really true legend in the marketing arena, the man behind the rise of Gong and the author of Courageous Marketing, Udi Ledergor. So buckle up, because over the next hour, we'll be discussing a lot of strategies on how to write content, the AI-driven breakthroughs that will turn your content in from basic to must-have. Before I do that, I would like to just give a quick shout out for VBout, which is basically the sponsor of this event. And every event since 2013. We've been doing this on a monthly basis, bringing some of the best content to you. And if you don't know what VBout is one of the top marketing growth platforms for small teams. So if you're a digital agency or if you're a marketing practitioner for a small marketing team, VBout is a product that could deliver your lead gen and lead nurture strategy for you. Um, our community has been growing and our reach is over 20,000 um, only on meetups, but we also have Facebook. We have an email distribution, which is well over 200,000 at this point, which means this content from today will be redistributed to over 200,000 people, and there will be engagements. If you haven't joined us on Facebook, the group is actually here. George will be dropping in links in the chat to for any resources and anything we discuss during this call. All right, so my guest today, and I'm just in terms of intros, I'm always afraid to underdeliver the achievements, but Udi has served as the CMO during Gong's rise. Everybody's familiar with Gong, especially if you're doing sales, you're doing marketing. So he led the growth from a new SaaS startup into an industry dominance. He built a playful, human-centric brand with a lighthearted tone. He captured buyers' attention, and most importantly, he captured dollars and turned them into raving fans. Sounds easy, but it's not. He helped Gong go from zero to hundreds of millions in revenue, achieving a unicorn valuation, which doesn't happen that often. He is also the author of Courageous Marketing. There are only few books on marketing that made the top sellers in the New York Times. So if you haven't grabbed your copy for Udi's book, George will be dropping in the Amazon link in the chat. I highly encourage um, you to get the book. And in fact, I'm gonna just grab somebody random at the end based on the comments and engagements, and I will be personally sending you the book on me. So, Udi, welcome.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here today.
Perfect, perfect. A quick background. People will be joining us from all over the world, in and out, um, and all the content will be shared, so you guys will not miss out on the recording. Also, everybody here is a marketer, Udi, so whatever we're going to discuss next is really going to resonate with them because they do content, they do email, and that's
My
really
kind
where
of
we are
people.
today, right? From positioning to persona, building brands that stick. Now, let's start from the beginning. Every company needs a content marketing strategy. They sit down, they spend hours and hours, and everybody comes up with an idea. Um, but often not discuss what are the best content marketing practices during those meetings, the brainstorming meetings. So tell me, how do you create content so good that people would actually pay for it?
Yeah, first, I have to take offense to the term best practices. And let me explain. What a lot of people call best practices are in reality boring practices because by the time anything becomes a so-called best practice, it's because everybody's doing it. And if you do what everybody else is doing, which might sound like a good idea because you feel like, well, it's been tested and so many people are doing it now. The problem is you're only going to get ordinary results at best because everyone's doing it. If you want extraordinary results, if you want content so good people would pay for it, you have to do something different. And so, in other words, playing it safe is the riskiest strategy of all. And it's okay to understand what the best practices are. Like, I'm not looking to get creative when I buckle my kids in the car. I'm going to follow the best practice and buckle them in. If I need a brain surgeon, I'm going to let them do what they need to do and follow best practices. But in marketing, where it's all about taking risks, standing out in a very noisy environment, and getting the attention that we need and is much harder to get now than it was just a few years ago, best practices are probably going to get into your way. So that's one thing you should know about the way I think about creating content.
So
So
we should just create our own practices, basically.
you should create your own practices. And
Okay.
I've noticed that every time I did something that is different than what most players were doing, not all times I got amazing results. Absolutely not. Anyone who's ever done something knows that we fail a lot more than we succeed. But all the great results that I saw came from doing something very different than others. It was never by repeating or copying or cloning a campaign or a content idea that I saw somewhere else. It was always some burst of originality. And after doing this for many, many years, I kind of reverse engineered it and figured out that there are a couple of formulas that you can use to tell you that you're on the right track to create content so good that people would pay for it. So let me start with how I think about this. So first mistake I think a lot of content marketing teams and marketing teams in general make is that they confuse content marketing with product marketing. These are two very different things, and allow me to demonstrate. So if you're putting out a piece that its main focus is about your product, its features, the competitive differentiation, maybe how successful one of your customers is, that is product marketing. That is not content marketing. Now, why do you need content marketing and how is it different? Content marketing provides value that is unrelated to consuming your product or service. Why do we need both of them and how do they work together? Well, for the sake of those who don't know the 95-5 rule, I'll quickly explain it here because it's a really crucial point when we go out to create content. So the 95-5 rule states that only about 5% of your audience are currently in market to buy a solution. The other 95%, they're just not in the buying zone. If you don't believe me, here's an example from our consumer life. Let's say you just bought a new car, okay? What were you doing in the last 3 months? You were going to websites of the different car manufacturers that you were considering. You were going to car comparison sites. You were watching YouTube videos of reviews on the cars that you were considering. And then finally, you made your decision. You went to 1 or 2 dealerships. You bought the car. Congratulations. You're now the proud new owner of a new car. What are you likely to be doing for the next 6 months? Are you still going to be going and watching YouTube reviews of other cars? Are you going to be going to car manufacturer sites to check their prices and features? Of course not. You just bought a new car. You're not in the market for a new car for the next couple of years at least, right? So if we understand that this is how we work as consumers, why do so many marketing plans and marketers assume that all of their market is in the buying zone right now? Because if I look at a lot of content that many brands are putting out there, it's very sales oriented. It's about their product. It tells me why it's great, why it's better than their competitor, and how their customers are having a great time using it. But if I'm not in the market for that product, what am I going to do after I see 3 or 4 or 5 of those ads? I'm going to unsubscribe. I'm going to unfollow. I'm going to block, right? I don't
Correct.
want any of that because it's becoming spam. What do I do want? I want content that gives me value while I'm not in the buying zone for your product. I want something that I will look forward to receiving in my inbox or reading on my social feed. I'll give you some examples. At Gong, we sell the leading revenue AI platform for sales teams. Now, I could tell you how amazing the product is and how we're better than the competition and how our 5,000 customers are loving it. But if you're not in the market for a revenue AI platform right now, you're going to find that pretty boring to the point that you're going to unsubscribe and unfollow me, right? So instead, I know that if I nurture you and provide value with content that you can consume now that doesn't sell my product to you, maybe in 12 or 18 months, when you are in that buying zone, I'm going to be the first brand that you think of, right? Because you've been consuming my content and getting a lot of value in it. In psychological terms, we call this creating memory links. I'm creating a memory link between the value that you're getting and my brand name, so that in 18 months, when you're in the market for a revenue AI platform, Gong is the first name that pops up because you're jogging that memory link. So what kind of content could I create that you would be interested in right now when you're not buying? Well, it's not going to be about the product. Here's some pieces of content that we put out there that have done really, really well. We did a research showing how long salespeople should talk on a discovery call. That's very interesting to every salesperson giving a demo or doing a discovery call,
Right.
whether or not they're using Gong or not. We did research that shows how many questions a salesperson should ask, whether it's a C-level or someone lower in rank. We showed when they should talk about pricing on the first call, on the second call, at the beginning of it, at the end of it. Turns out there's different results. And we showed that data and explained it in content that is so interesting that people downloaded it and gave it out to their entire teams and propelled it to a lot of other people who they thought would find it useful. One of our most successful content pieces was when we did a research that found out that salespeople who swear on their sales calls have an 8% higher win rate if they use the S word or an F-bomb. And we explained why that happens and how to use it as an effective mirroring technique. Now, when we published that piece of content, it literally went viral. We got free press from it because fastcompany.com ran with the story. I then got a phone call on my phone from a Canadian radio station who read about it and wanted to interview me on air about it. And all these things happened with us just putting thought into what would be interesting to our audience that wouldn't look like a commercial for our product. And it worked. And we repeated that over and over again, publishing different reports based on our unique analysis of sales conversations, of sales emails. We did surveys. All these things provide a lot of value and they don't feel like a commercial that's pushing our product. So that's maybe the first concrete tip that I would give here. Always start not with what you're trying to say, but what is your audience looking to learn? What can you do to make their day easier and better? Can I give them a template or a cheat sheet or a fact, a tip that they can use today in their work? If they're salespeople, what can they do on their next sales call? If they're a project manager, how can they more easily launch their next project? If they're a finance person, where can they find savings? Provide value that doesn't require them to buy your product. I'll take a pause here.
This is a great point because there's a little bit of an art to what you said, Udi, because you took the solution to a problem, which is what Gong was delivering. You guys turned salespeople into, well, sales calls and meetings into deep insights. So you took the outcome of the product, and from that, you generated a lot of content. And even though you're not talking about Gong directly in those pieces of content, but there's a complete correlation. Now, the question that derives from this is if somebody has a finance startup, right? They created a B2B AI software that optimizes company spending. Should they be going out and talking about I don't know, AI in engineering, or they should stick to the solution or the problem that they set out to solve?
So that's a great question. Richard, my view on this is that I need to start with the audience. So obviously, since I'm a company creating software that I eventually want to sell to them, so I know who my audience is for the product. Now, that same audience, let's pretend I didn't have a product to sell them. What value could I provide them in the form of content? And there's many great examples. If you look at HubSpot in the early days, created so many free tools for marketers. So they kept coming back and coming back to their website until eventually they bought their marketing automation system. This was before they were a CRM. So HubSpot created a website grader where you could type in your
Right.
website URL and it would grade it on a bunch of parameters to tell you where you can improve it. And you didn't have to buy their product to do that. It created an email signature generator. It created an out of office message generator. it created all these free tools and templates that marketers kept going back and back, creating those memory links. So when they were finally in the market for a marketing automation system, of course, they went to HubSpot because that's the company that was providing them with so much value. So to answer your question, it has to be to the same audience. It has to be in the same domain. Should it use a byproduct of your product that you're eventually going to sell? It is a nice to have if you can make that happen, but it doesn't have to happen. Some products just don't lend themselves to that sort of analysis that I talked about that we use to create Gong content. But at other companies, I've done surveys. So here's an example. I worked for a company called Panaya, and we were selling to SAP ERP users. And so I created some content that was based on analysis, proprietary analysis that we ran, but that wasn't enough. I wanted more content. So I thought, what would SAP users be interested in? And one thought that we had was, well, they probably want to know if they're earning enough and if they have potential to earn more. So we ran a survey, very low tech. We just sent out a survey, and we asked a few hundred SAP professionals what they were earning and where they were and what seniority they were and how much experience and what education and what gender they were and all these different parameters. And then we put together a 30-page report with some sensational charts, and we put out a press release showing that there's still a gender gap where SAP using men earn a lot more than SAP using women. We also found some interesting nuggets that those using the latest version of SAP were actually earning more than those using earlier version of SAP, suggesting that by filling in that knowledge gap, you could get more money. We showed which territories SAP users were earning more money in. So this became a very, very popular piece of content. Thousands of people ended up downloading it because they all wanted to know if they're being underpaid and what they can do to earn more. And guess what? They didn't have to buy my product to do all of that.
And I did notice this pattern that you're actually just gathering such good data and insights based on the feedback of your clients and turning that into content. I'm assuming that's just one of the strategies for building content, correct?
Correct, because without data, I'm just another guy with an opinion. And God knows
Correct.
the world has enough of those, especially on LinkedIn. So if you can come with indisputable data or even disputable data that creates a conversation and an argument, that's wonderful. You know, when we published the research on salespeople swearing, having a higher win rate, it created a virtual shit show, pardon my French, on LinkedIn, because lots of people were having a field day saying, this is the shit I've been talking about, and using all their very colorful vocabulary and tagging each other saying, see, I told you that's a good thing when I talk like that to my customers. And then a smaller but important vocal part of the audience were appalled that we suggest using this language in a professional setting. Now, that is a marketer's dream, because I think a lot of people mistakenly think that they should create something that everybody likes and nobody hates. Well, here's the newsflash. You're not pizza. You can't be loved by everyone. Okay, none of us can. And what you should be afraid of is not some people hating your content. The thing you should be afraid of is people ignoring your content. And
Yep.
when you write something so agreeable, so shallow, so trivial that nobody finds it offensive, chances are nobody's finding it exciting either. Okay.
Great.
So shall we take it to the next formula of what are the three things that I found in every top performing piece of content?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So the first thing we talked about was starting from your customer's end. What do they cared about? Now, here's how you check yourself. Does this piece of content have chances of succeeding? So I found that there's three things that every great piece of content has. Number one, it's hyper relevant to the audience that it was written for. Number two, it's interesting and timely, and I'll go back and explain these. Number three, it's immediately applicable. So let's go back and dive in with a few sentences to explain each of those. What do I mean by hyper relevant? If you have 4 different audiences and you try to create a piece of content for all of them are probably going to feel that this was written for someone else. It's so generic that they're not getting value from it. If you're writing to CFOs, make sure that the title and the content talks about mistakes CFOs can't afford to make in Q4. Make it specific and hyper relevant, because think about this. If you get an email and the subject line is something like 3 mistakes you're probably making, you're going to think like, okay, that's not for me,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Someone just
Going what?
post spam that. But if it says, hey, this is for mid-market tech CMOs, and these are the 3 mistakes you can't afford to make in Q3. Now that sounds very specific. It might actually have something relevant for me, right? And so that's the type of hyper relevance that you have to have. And lots of times marketers become lazy and they say, well, I'm also writing for RevOps and for sales and for finance, so I'll kind of keep it general. But if you keep it general, if you're writing for everybody, you're not writing for anybody. So that's number one, keep it hyper relevant. The second thing is it has to be interesting and timely, so they have to care about the topic. So if marketers tend to do their budget planning in the second half of the year, that's when you should send out this article. Don't send it out in January or February, because by then we're already in the beginning of a new budget year and we're already done budgeting for the year. So that would be useless at
At
that
some
time. So
point.
think about the calendar of events. And if Dreamforce is next month, now is a great time to publish a piece of content on 5 things you can't afford to miss at next month's Dreamforce. That would be a perfect time. But if you send it in 2 months, nobody's going to read it, right?
Right.
So timeliness and interest, like what are they trying to solve for right now? I'll give you an example. During COVID, we found that a lot of deals were stalled because there was so much economic uncertainty that CFOs jumped in and demanded to approve even small deals that their company was buying. And so we found that there was a gap of knowledge, that lots of salespeople who were selling small deals, they never had to go through the CFO before, and they had no idea how to negotiate with the CFO and make their business case. So as soon as we heard that on a few customer calls at Gong, we thought, well, this must be a wider problem. We quickly created a 2-page cheat sheet for how to get through your buyer's CFO, and we made that available in
Nice.
days. And thousands of people downloaded it because, as we suspected, thousands of salespeople were struggling to get past their buyer CFO. So we gave it to them when that was their number one problem and everyone was trying to solve that. So by responding in almost real time to what you're hearing in the market, you can create something that becomes very trendy and very effective very quickly. So that's on interesting and timely. And finally, the third one is make it immediately applicable. And what I mean by that is, some brave people who joined us here for an hour-long podcast are finding this interesting, but you could probably get more people to consume a piece of content if it didn't take 45 or 60 minutes to consume. Very few people read a 40-page white paper anymore, and not many people come to a 1-hour podcast or webinar like we're doing today. But you know what thousands of people consume? They consume 15-second TikToks. So if you can condense your content to something that short, you might actually get to thousands or millions of people. We found that even if we do a extensive research, and let's say we have 6 different data charts in it, we'll publish a long blog, but we'll also use each one of those charts for its own separate social media post, and that gets a ton of traffic. And then if people are interested in that, we provide a link that they can go and learn more and read the full long form content. So think about condensing things, because everybody's busy and nobody's got time for a 40-page white paper right now.
That's great. So understanding the business dynamics, these calls with customers, the feedback you're getting, you're literally getting in there as a content because there's a big gap sometimes between sales, marketing. They sit in different places. They communicate on weekly sprints, but not enough. So it seems like you were in there in the trenches, understanding the problems and the feedback and turning them into content, which I think that's a great strategy.
If you're a marketer and you're not listening to Gong calls and not using Gong tools to get insights from what your customers and buyers are talking about, you're not playing the right game right now.
That's great. Now, how do you measure your pieces of content? Assuming you were able to come up with this, your own best practices internally, you put a content together. What did you do to or what do you use to measure it?
So there's several plays, and I know you want to touch on distribution a little bit later, but I feel this is a good point in time to jump to that to explain some of the measurement and thinking around that. So we have an email program, we have a social program, we have paid programs. But let me give you one simple distribution example that I think a lot of people just overlook. So I talk to marketers who tell me, Udi, I can't get any budget or convince my CEO or CFO that we should write long articles like the ones that you talk about, because they do require some research and work if you want to create something unique and interesting and exclusive, because then we just publish it on the web or on LinkedIn and we have no idea who read it, whoever bought from us. Like, there's no way to measure this, right? I say wrong. There is a way to measure this. So here's how we do this at Gong to this day. We figured that if we publish an article on LinkedIn, it's going to be in the public domain because that's the only way you can publish articles on LinkedIn. And we use LinkedIn because that's where our audience of sales leaders are. But you could do something similar on other social platforms depending on where your audience is. So when we publish on LinkedIn, we're optimizing for reach. We want as many people as possible to read that article. Now, those are still anonymous readers, right? We don't know who they are. We don't know how to track them. So here's what we do. We put a link about halfway into the article and again at the end of the article that sends people to a premium piece of content that's very closely tied to that public domain article. I'll give you an example. We talked about the benefits of swearing on a sales call. So if we publish that as an open article on LinkedIn, we might put a link in the article that says, to get the list of the top 30 swear words that you should consider using, click here to download. Now, if someone is reading that article, they're in that mental zone, we think they'll be interested in downloading that list of the top 30 dirty words that they should consider using. And guess what? Lots of people do click that. When they click that, they get to a landing page on our website where there is a gate of a contact form. And it's very simple. We typically just ask for the email, knowing that we can get everything else later. And then we didn't let them download that PDF. And so now, on the day that we publish an article, it's already set up with that secondary premium download. And now we can set a goal. We want 3,500 downloads of our premium asset. And once we get those 3,500 downloads, we're going to score them against our demographics of our ideal buyer profile. And those who are the right profile, they become MQLs. And then someone's going to follow up on them. Either we put them into an automated nurturing program, or a BDR gives them a call, or we even let an AE know that one of his strategic accounts just read about swearing on sales calls, so that she can make a warm call, not a cold call. She can make a warm call and say, hey, Richard, I noticed you downloaded our cheat sheet for 30 curse words for your sales calls. I wanted to hear your experience. Was that helpful? Did you find it interesting? Can I help with anything else? And now we're having a fun, warm conversation because it has context. It's no longer a cold call. And so that's, in a nutshell, how we measure what we do in the content world on social media, and how we tie that in with creating and advancing opportunities.
To be clear, you didn't gate the first content. You
Nope.
created secondary content. So the first content was so good and accessible right there on LinkedIn. However,
Correct.
in the middle of it, you send them somewhere else, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's exactly what we do. The first piece is optimized for reach, not for conversion.
Okay, great.
Once we get that reach, we open a broad net. We cast a broad net. There's lots of people in it now. And now we can start using a spear to push some of them through the funnel and convert them with the secondary premium content. And there's some best practices, again, a term I hate, for doing that. One, that secondary piece has to be closely tied to the first one. If you're writing the first one about cars, the second one can't be about planes because it's a different audience, right? It has to be about similar topic, and it has to be a deep dive, something that's irresistible to the readers of the first piece. And you've got to make it super simple. Don't ask for 20 things on the form. Ask for one if you can. And you can always get a chance to ask the other stuff later. So just be in their mindset. What would make it a frictionless experience for your reader? And then take them down that path.
That's great. That's great. I like that. So it's reach on the first piece of content, downloads on the second, and then from there you can obviously have, how many demos booked or calls made, how many demos booked, how many closed. So you can continue
Right.
to measure that down the road. Do you find there's a disconnect in this attribution, or were you always very good in saying, you know what, this piece of content about swearing ended up with 50 closed deals? Have you been able to tie this whole thing together?
Yes, we can, but I'll also say this, I'm not obsessed about that attribution, because when something works extremely well, if we get thousands of downloads from relevant buyers who become MQLs, at that point I'm satisfied, because I know there's a good chance that some of them are going to become buyers, and that was a good piece of content, and I'll probably ask my team to go create something else that looks like that. If I get crickets, if nobody downloaded it, or if I just get a handful of downloads, then I know that was the wrong direction and I'll go figure out something else. So we're not obsessed about following and tracking every lead from the website till they write us a check, because marketing is really about doing two things. Marketing is about one thing, but I'll break that into two. Marketing is about making sales easier. I've said that many opportunities, including in my book, and I explain how to demonstrate that to the sales team to create trust with them. And we make sales easier in a few ways, but the two main ones are: one, we source pipelines. So people who read our content or see our ads or listen to our talks or watch our videos, they end up going to the website and asking to speak to a salesperson. So that is content that marketing sources. The second way that we help sales make it easier is we influence and support the outbound motion that the BDRs and the AEs and the partners are doing. And for that, we provide them with interesting content that they can send out, and all sorts of interesting signals on what their accounts and contacts are doing. So as long as we can do those two things, I don't care about the click path of every single lead. As long as I'm hitting my numbers and I'm influencing enough millions of dollars of pipeline and I'm sourcing enough millions of dollars of pipeline, that's usually enough to hit my targets.
So if you're listening to this and you have a big team and you're putting a lot of pressure on your marketing because your sales is not closing, that's probably the wrong way to look at it. Because I've been on meetings with companies while they're setting up VBOT where they have this like, okay, so you've gotten so many leads, they're not closing, and you get the sales team frustrated because they're creating good content that's not converting at the end on the short term. You know what I mean? So there's sometimes this pressure on the marketing team, whereas let you do your own thing as long as you're worried about the reach and you're getting that, the downloads, you're getting that, then the rest is obviously not your concern. Well, it is, but it's not in a way.
It
Yeah.
is. And I think marketers should be pressured to make sure that they bring leads that close, and they should help close those leads faster and at higher conversion rates. So we do need to look at these things. I'm not saying your job is just to dump leads over the fence and then go get more and don't worry about the leads closing. So it's a little more nuanced than that. And the good marketers, of course, they know what drives sales. And that part I would say though is probably more product marketing than it is content marketing, because once a lead is interested in talking to a salesperson, it's usually product marketing materials that's going to push them to convert to the next opportunity stage.
Awesome. This is great stuff. Thank you. I want to talk about the distribution, and you started that already, but everybody struggles figuring out, is it LinkedIn? Is it TikTok? Is it YouTube? Whatever. I mean, how do you approach it?
So it's a very big and nuanced question, because if I were advising you specifically here, I would ask you questions about the maturity of your category and how big are your competitors and where are your buyers in their buying cycle. It's a very nuanced question. So I'll just pick one path to kind of demonstrate some of the nuances and thinking behind it. So when we started at Gong, we were creating a new category. It was conversation intelligence at the time, and very few people knew about it. So it was a very nascent category. Nobody was searching for a solution in conversation intelligence. So things like Google search were probably useless to us.
Mhm.
Now, I was also a very small startup. I joined Gong after the seed round. So we had very little money. I had a shoestring budget. So I couldn't spend millions on LinkedIn ads and hope that they convert. And I'm glad I couldn't, because that would have been a huge waste of money. So instead, I had to get very creative and create content that was so interesting that it organically went viral. People would share it with their teams. They would share it on LinkedIn and comment on it. They would get into long discussions and arguments on it. So that is the direction of creating the content. Now, when thinking about distribution, I found there's three organic, very effective way of distributing content that cost you very little as long as you created great content. And those three channels are: one, organic social media. So we quickly focused on LinkedIn because we found that that is where our audience lives. for other companies and industries could be somewhere else, but it's usually one channel where they focus. Could be X, it could be Instagram, depending on the product and category, but find that one channel and then optimize all your content for that one channel. Like really learn how their algorithm works, look at what others are doing, what's working, what's failing, and experiment on that one channel. If you try to create content for 10 or 20 channels, even with Gong's resources, we couldn't optimize for 10 different channels. And so we had to quickly learn where is the audience concentrated and optimize for that one channel so we can become experts on it. Like we have a team that knows every month the changes in the algorithm and is video doing better than images right now, and how long should a text post be, and what are the practices of putting the link in the comment versus in the post, and how that's changed in the last month. If you don't know that, then you're not making good use of the channel. So right. Organic social is one. The second one, which has been around for 25 years, and if you ask me, it's probably going to be around for many more years, is email. Email is not going anywhere. The death of email has been proclaimed too many times over the years. But here's the fact. When you get an email, you do see it. You see the subject line in the sender, and you need to decide, are you going to open this or are you going to delete it? That's not the case with almost any other channel. On social media, you're scrolling so fast, you probably even miss in your eyes many of the posts, and some of them you don't even see because of the lords of the feed algorithm. But in your email, everything is there for you to see. And if the sender uses a good name that you might find familiar, and if they use a hyper-specific, interesting, and timely subject line, you might actually open that email. So email is a huge channel for us. And we've used that from day one, and we've grown to hundreds of thousands of subscribers to our email program. We recently crossed 300,000 followers on our LinkedIn profile. So those two organic channels alone are probably responsible for a huge part of our pipeline. And then I'll mention two more. So a third one that we started doing in the early days was creating speaking content that we could take to industry conferences. And our content was so good because it was based on stuff like I shared already that people saw on social media, that we got invited to speak at conferences without having to pay a sponsorship fee. People wanted us there because they knew it would help them sell tickets and draw an audience and create a great experience for their attendees. So again, if you put in the work and the creativity and create content so good that people are willing to pay for it, you will get invited to speak in conferences, and then you get a stage to go on for 25 or 45 minutes in front of hundreds or sometimes thousands of people, and you don't have to pay to do that. So that's amazing reach at zero cost. So that's number three. And then the fourth one that I'll mention that gets more important as the company grows is using employees to amplify your content. So if you're following anyone from Gong, I'm sure you see that a few times a year when we have big announcements, could be a product announcement or a fundraising announcement or a partnership announcement, we get hundreds of our employees to amplify that on social media. It costs us zero, and each one of them has between hundreds to thousands of followers. So I'm getting this huge reach, and I'm not paying anything for it because I make it easy for my employees to share big news and content, sometimes with their own take on it. And that also increases reach. And we developed that muscle very, very early on. So now it's natural that we put a calendar hold or send a Slack message or an email, and we can get hundreds of Gongsters to share our marketing messages.
That's awesome. I love this. So one, choose one of the social media channels where your customers most likely are to engage and focus on that instead of, focusing on all channels. Obviously, two, continue using email. Email is not going anywhere, still there, on whatever capacity you're doing it via, be it like an outreach one-to-one, personalized, or be it your newsletter program. Be bumping good content that people are willing to kind of get you on their speaking gigs. And the last one is use your employees as advocates of your brand and create an easy way to do it, because I've noticed there's a lot of resistance sometimes. They don't do it, they get lazy. So it's like a Slack channel and everybody got to do it. Everybody got to do it, right?
I would check if there's a lot of resistance. It's probably because the content sucks and the employees aren't proud and aren't excited to share it. Right. If it looks like a robot wrote it, or if it's something boring, and if it's all about the product and you don't have a lot of people interested in the product right now, that's not going to be something employees are excited or proud to share. But if it's a valuable, edgy piece of content, like why you should swear on sales call, of course everyone's going to want to share that. It's going to make them look smart and cool and edgy, and they're going to get a discussion on their own post, and they're going to help build their own personal brands. So think about what would make your employees proud and excited to share your content.
That's great. Now, is it automatic? Like if I'm B2B, I'm gonna have to be on LinkedIn, and if I'm B2C, I probably should be on Instagram. Or you
I don't
found
think,
sometimes that
I think
B2B
there's,
companies can also exist on other channels.
for sure, for sure. I wouldn't do anything on automatic, because that goes back to the best practices that I hate so much. I would I would do some research to find out where is your audience, and the answer is probably they're in more than one place. So, like
Right.
I said before, I would focus like most of my work on that one channel where they're doing all of their engagement. But hey, if they're also on Instagram after work or on their TikTok or going to a concert, you can also be there and show up in creative places. We've done everything from out of home advertising to catch people near a conference, or wrapped around Uber cars to pick them up to go to where they need to go. I've even experimented with a food delivery robots that were branded with Gong and delivered pizza to prospects. You can do all these crazy things. It doesn't all have to be on LinkedIn. And in fact, if you surprise and delight them with a channel that they weren't expecting you on, that becomes much more memorable. And maybe the last tip I'll say on that is that once you do pick a channel, try to think about how to look different than everything else already happening on that channel. So as an example, if you create a TikTok style video and put it on LinkedIn, it's probably going to get a lot more eyeballs than a regular LinkedIn post would get there, because it looks like it doesn't belong, and people are going to scratch their head going, wait, what is that? That looks different. If your posts are too polished and too uniform and look like they natively belong on the platform, they look like ads, and nobody's going to stop to read an
Right.
ad.
Thank you. Um, well, AI, right? And inevitable, we gotta
You've
talk
heard of
about
AI,
AI
yeah. I think it's
and
catching
how
up.
it gonna reshape content marketing. What are your thoughts on it?
So AI is an amazing tool and a shift in what we're all doing, not just in marketing. Um, and I think, like any tool and technology that we've seen, I've been in B2B marketing for over 20 years. Every tool and technology that we've seen has mostly been abused. And that's happening now with AI, and it will continue happening as well.
Right.
The smart marketers are going to understand what are the good ways of using AI to make their work easier and better, and what are the bad ways of using AI that they should avoid. I'll give you an example. 15 years ago, some of my fellow marketers were very excited when they learned that they could offshore their content writing to someone in a low labor cost country that would write a blog post for $50. And they were very proud of that discovery. They said, wow, Udi, you're spending like what, $500 on writing an article? I've got a guy who will do it for $50 for you. And I said, I think I'll stick to my $500 guy. Thank you. Which article do you think got an audience? Nobody wants to read the $50 article that someone wrote who can write in the morning about cybersecurity, in the evening about agriculture, and after that, I don't know what about, because they're not a domain expert. All the articles are only an inch deep. They're fluffy, they're trivial, they're shallow, and they're probably a listicle that they put together by Googling the title of the article. But when I invested and I did primary research, either analyzing data from my product and customers, or doing a survey and talking to 100 people, or collecting their responses and thoughts and then analyzing that, I put together an interesting piece of content that was exclusive, that was deep, that people actually wanted to consume. Back to present day, I see marketers that are looking at AI the same way as my colleagues looked at that $50 offshore writer 15 years ago. And they're like, oh, great, I don't need to write content anymore. I just go into some AI tool and say, hey, I need a 2,000 word article on the future of so and so. Please create something for me. And they'll get a 2,000 word, very well written piece of content that nobody wants to read. Why? Because it feels like we've all read it before. And that is because we have read it before. Because when you ask ChatGPT to create something new, it's going to piece together and regurgitate things that other people have already written on the topic. So you're not going to get anything new and exciting and deep and exclusive. But when you sit down with your team and you think, okay, what hasn't been done in my field yet? What could be a crazy angle that we would take? That's when you come up with the crazy ideas. And that's when you can start fleshing out a few of the main points. And then, by all means, use an AI tool to complete the 2,000 words, check your grammar, chop it down into 4 shorter pieces for social, create a slide deck out of it. Those are great uses for AI, but I would not trust AI as the thought leader to come up with an opinion, with a sharp point of view, and with an angle with which I want to lead. And I'll end this part of the discussion with a great tip from one of my CMO friends, Kai Lacey at Jellyfish. So he said, here's a fun way that he's been using AI. When they go into a brainstorming meeting, like I just described, and they need to come up with a content idea, they'll go into something like ChatGPT and ask it for the top 10 ideas in the domain that they're looking for. And then they'll take those 10 ideas and take them off the table, saying, these are 10 most obvious ideas that we're not going to do. Now let's think harder about things that ChatGPT could not come up with. And what's the 11th and 20th idea that we could do that has not been done 1,000 times? So that's a great way of using AI for eliminating the obvious best practices and leaving room for something original that we're still humanly qualified to come up with.
That's great. Because like you said, AI is taking what's already out there and it's using best practices. The part that's boring to come up with a new version of it with some twist. And I don't think it's going to have the insight you're going to have working directly with customers and clients and
Of course
getting
not.
on these sales calls and reading transcripts. It can compile that data into something a little bit more structured. But I do see what you're saying here. Like you really got to put your own twist and deep knowledge on it because it's always going to be shallow to some extent, and you want to go deep with your content knowledge when it comes to writing these pieces. Um, so if you are to maybe, give 1 or 2 tips on how to stand out with your content, what would those be?
The final tip here, based on everything we just talked about, is to move away from the so-called best practices into what I call in my book, and I named my book after it, courageous marketing. Move from best practices to courageous marketing. Courageous marketing means having a unique, sharp point of view that does not try to copy or imitate what others are doing, and then go and from that derive interesting content that's hyper relevant and interesting and timely and immediately applicable, and use all the distribution channels that we talked about them. And just think before you do anything, nothing has to be on auto mode. Nothing has to be a boring moment. I give an example in the book of a privacy policy email, which is usually the most boring email that any marketing team has to send out in a given year, saying we've updated our privacy policy email. Well, at Gong, we found a way of creating a moment of delight around that email. And if you go read the book, you'll find all the details. But a little spoiler, we used like a Britney Spears meme, and we created a pretty scary subject line that said, our lawyers made us do this, which got a 39.5% open rate. So pretty much 40% of our audience opened that email, which is an amazing start. And then when they saw the humorous text inside, they cracked up. Lots of people shared that email, a privacy policy email. They shared it on Twitter. They shared it on LinkedIn. One lady wrote an entire blog post on Medium about it. And that is all the proof you need that nothing has to be boring. You can take the most mundane email of the year, turn it into a moment of delight that grabs attention, creates memory links, and brings you eventually more buyers.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. This was great. And content strategy, content marketing is not dead and it's not fully outsourced to AI. That's the takeaway I really wanted to get out of this because a lot of people are just think AI is just gonna write everything from now on. I don't think that's the case. The deeper you go in the topic, you find the right moment, like you said, in a timely fashion, you get your own twist and personality. I think you can definitely stand out. Um, so really, thank you so much. I want to take some questions if you have some time, maybe 5 minutes from the audience. Anybody would like to ask Udi while he's with us on the call about anything content related? Many of you, if not all of you, write content. So does anyone want to ask Udi anything? Don't be shy. And George, I don't know if you got they got the YouTube feed as well.
Yes, yes, the YouTube is running, but no comments yet.
Okay, somebody messaged me direct. John said, "Do you recommend pushing it on our blog or simply go on the distribution channel?"
I would do both. So, uh, putting aside for a moment the whole topic of the SEO world changing as we speak, what we typically do is we post the same article on where the audience is, which in our case is LinkedIn, and we mirror it on our blog so that future searches will bring folks back to our website versus to LinkedIn. SEO and LinkedIn is a whole can of worms that we're not going to get into today. But even if it worked, which it doesn't work well, you'd still want to drive that traffic back to your website. So the cadence that we've established is at first it goes on LinkedIn, give it the visibility it deserves there. And then a couple of days later, we'll quietly mirror it on our website so that future Google searches will get people back to our website. And on our website, we have a lot more control on what we do to convert people. We have different pop-ups that we can do. We can subscribe them to a newsletter. We can do things that LinkedIn doesn't let us do on its native platform. So that's my short answer.
That's great. I have another question. Do you write content and take in consideration how AI might include it in the AI results? I think we
Yes, so
understand
now we
that.
are.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
now we are. The world, I kind of alluded to this in my previous answer. Um, the the SEO world is changing now to the AI search world, and we're all experiencing less traffic from clicks because most people now look at the result and they're not using Google and the other search engines to see a list of links that they can click. They're using it to get an answer to a question that they have. And so what you want to focus on these days is making sure that when the robots scan your website, they find the answers to the typical questions. So the overall big picture hasn't changed. You still have to create real valuable content that the search engines will want to quote and that the readers will be satisfied with as an answer. If you do that in a smart way that continues to create those branded memory links, then maybe not on the day where your buyer is asking a question and he was happy with the answer that the AI search engine brought him, but maybe 6 months later when he's ready to buy, he will remember seeing your name either in the answer that ChatGPT or Claude or whatever engine he was using gave him, or he will remember seeing you in one of the link sources, so he will go back and find you. So do expect fewer links, but for most B2B businesses, that's not the end of the world because most people who got to you from a website, from a search engine, are not going to buy the day they arrive. They're still doing their research. So now they're just stopping that research in most cases, I think about 2/3 of the cases, on the search engine versus going to your website. So continue writing great content that the robots are going to pick up, that readers are going to be happy with, and make sure you brand it so that they remember your name so they can go directly to your website when they're ready to buy from you or consume more of your content.
And some of the LLMs as well, they might reference back sources if you ask, they're trying to get better at this, especially with a lot of companies are suing the big guys for just using their stuff for learning. Um, so I think eventually a lot of link backs are going to happen, but it's going to happen differently. Um, so I got another question here, a couple. Should we use our own blog or a separate website that then drives traffic to the website? We market to churches, we own churchmanagement.com, and we are looking for using that to content marketing instead of our business page.
I would say that so there's considerations in both ways, right? If you're trying to create a separate brand that people trust as a content source, and you don't want to muddy it with business offers, then you should probably keep it on a separate website. But the other side of that is that, of course, you're losing brand equity and you're splitting your budget and effort and energy between these two different brands. I would say that in most cases, unless you have a really, really compelling reason for that split, I would favor combining them because you probably don't have a huge budget and you want all the budget that you have to work towards creating one stronger, coherent brand. So as long as your sales offers are not too in the face of the content readers, they don't feel violated when they're reading your content because you're popping up with get 25% off and click here and do that. So as long as you're not doing that, I think they will be forgiving and understanding if you do combine those brands. And then you can find tasteful ways of converting your content readers into business customers. That would be my short answer without having all the context and details.
Awesome. Last question from Hope. And by the way, Anirudhu, I think we answered your question, is that the basics of writing stays the same. So to gain visibility on LMS, you just keep on doing it the right way as you were doing before, because from what I understood, and correct me, Udi, it's just happening. That was a question that I skipped because I think you answered. Um, so Hope is asking, do you rewrite the article that you put on LinkedIn to put on your blog, or do you post the same exact content without any structuring?
I think it's 95% identical. The changes that we would make would be for the SEO optimization. So anything like considering what our H1s and 2s are going to be, what specific keywords we're trying to rank for at this moment. But again, that's a little bit of the old world that's changing very rapidly now. I would imagine that we would make such adjustments, again, to drive more of the generative search engine traffic back to our website. But I would keep 95% of it identical if you published a good article in the first place.
Got it. Awesome. All right. Well, this was great content. I want to thank you so much for coming here. I mean, content marketing is one of those where everybody struggles, and I think with good insights is just you cannot beat it. So thank you so much for coming here. Um, I would actually like to send the three questions, or the three I have Anirudhu, Justin, and Hope. Please stay and give me your email. I'm gonna send you the downloadable Audible for Udi's book, for asking the question. So I appreciate you participating. So please stick around so I know where to send you the Audible downloads directly from Amazon. Um,
And
so
for the rest of the
yeah,
folks, I just put the link in the chat if they're interested in learning more. Everything I talked about today is in the book, along with 11 other chapters on everything from events to brand building to category design to building a courageous team. So thank you, everyone, for your time today.
thank you so much, Udi.
Thanks for
Appreciate
Thank
having
it.
me.
you.
Take care.
Justin, Anirudh, and Hope, please send me directly your email right now, so I can send you the Audible download on us. Um, that would really appreciate it. There we go. Thank you, Hope. Justin, thank you. Let me just take these notes and yeah, thanks everybody who joined us. We'll see you next month on another awesome topic, and yeah, happy, very hot summer, which is what everybody's been complaining about recently. So stay cool, and we'll see you next month.
See you. Thank you.
Bye bye, George.
Bye.